What's up, everybody? It's Blake and Vish Sports. It's been a while. We had midterms the last couple weeks, so Blake and Vish, or Blake and I'm Vish, but that's Blake. But we were basically unable to stream because of that. We're back. I know that we're 5 weeks into the NFL season. Blake and I still have done only our Monday, Friday schedule once in these last 5 weeks. It's been a little bit unpredictable in terms of our schedules, but we are hoping to continue that schedule. I don't know if we will be streaming this Friday, but we will be back Monday, Friday next week. At least that's the way it looks at this moment. But otherwise, we have the opportunity now to stream. We have a little bit of time. Great news happened, or interesting news happened with the 49ers that we got to discuss with DeForest Buckner and his comments and what he talked about in his phone interview with 49ers reporters. I know it's got a lot of people in 49ers, a lot of 49ers fans all angry. They were already angry at Kyle Shanahan. Now they're even angrier. But Blake, what's up? How's it going? Nice to be back on stream. What's going on?
Yeah, nothing much. Just, Packers still just club dub, still winning. Niners are coming back. Maybe Jimmy, we get to see him again. Trey Lance, is he gonna play? I don't know,
I
but
don't think so.
I'm
He's
sure
hurt.
you I'm sure you talked with Grant about that enough on Monday already. So we
Yeah.
can argue today.
I'd love to just, talk more about Trey Lance and Jimmy Garoppolo, but the nice thing is there's 31 other teams in the NFL, 31 other quarterback situations in the NFL. And so we're going to start off with the 49ers. Obviously, it's the hottest topic probably over the last 3 hours. DeForest Buckner says that he was willing to take less money to stay with the 49ers. He felt like the 49ers didn't offer him anything comparable to the 4 years, $84 million a contract that he ultimately ended up signing with the Indianapolis Colts. We know DeForest Buckner is a great player. We know he's a consummate professional, consummate leader. And he was drafted by the 49ers. Blake, what was your big takeaway from his comments? And what is your overall outlook on the DeForest Buckner trade?
Yeah, so I really totally get this from the Niners standpoint. Just I mean, honestly, but I think this was one of the rare sort of win-win trades where I think both sides got what they were looking for. The Niners were a little cap strapped and they had other guys they needed to sign or wanted to sign. So they went and got a pick, a first rounder, which ended up being Kinlaw, who was there to replace him, who was a lot cheaper, which I understand the methodology. I like that. And then the Colts, they're looking to win now. They thought that Buckner was worth a pick, and I would argue an all-pro D tackle is worth the 13th or 14th pick in the draft. They signed him to a big deal, and he's kind of the cornerstone defensive player along with Darius Leonard for them. So both sides of that, I agree. I think him saying he was willing to take less money shows how much he thought or how much he believed in the Niners organization going forward. It's kind of that. I mean, this has been done with Tom Brady's done this. You hear about it. He takes less money to stay on a team because he wants to be more competitive. He wants to win. I view that what Tom Brady did the same way what Buckner was doing, thinking, hey, like I was just part of one of the best defenses in the league. I'm going to stay here and continue, doing what I've been doing. And so I think that's really, really good sign of, praise for the Niners in the sense that he wanted to do that. But my big question that I kind of have been wondering about, and I'm interested to hear what you say, is if the Niners didn't trade Buckner and they paid him, let's say 18 or 19 million a year for 4 years, do you think they would be all in with Garoppolo, or do you still think they would have made the move for Trey Lance?
Yeah, I think the quarterback situation is honestly individual.
Okay.
I don't think it has a lot to do with this. I think at some point you looked at the contracts. The 49ers couldn't have continued paying Garoppolo the price that they pay him for the level of play they were getting, especially if they had a DeForest Buckner,
Sure.
because I don't think DeForest Buckner getting paid would have affected the impending contract of Fred Warner ultimately getting paid.
Mhm.
Trent Williams ultimately getting paid. Nick Bosa is going to be up after this year. That's going to be a $30 million a year type contract. So I do think that the Niners, if Garoppolo's play continued at the same trend, which it has continued at that same kind of average level, they did need to get cheaper at the quarterback position because they needed better value for the level of play they were getting. So to me, there was no doubt that I think that the Niners would have ended up trading for a quarterback or acquiring something different at quarterback at some point over the next 2 years, whether they kept Buckner or
Okay.
not. Honestly, I'm not surprised that Buckner was willing to take less money to stay with the 49ers. I mean, they're the team that drafted him. DeForest Buckner seems like the type of guy that wants to play for one organization his entire career. I don't think he missed a start as a 49er. He was a very, very good player. He's been a very good player for the Colts. He's an all-pro level player. I'm a little surprised that he seemed to come across as feeling, or at least the way his comments were reported, was that the Niners didn't even make the effort to try and find a middle ground with him. He felt like they were just kind of set on either he takes way less money or he just gets traded, which to me, him sounding like that is a little bit shocking because obviously, again, DeForest Buckner, excellent player. You don't need me to tell you that. Everybody knows that. So you would think that the Niners would make a huge effort to keep him, but it didn't seem like they did. But honestly, my biggest takeaway is I still think they made the right move trading DeForest Buckner. I have kind of a weird take on the idea of analytical value and how much each position should get paid versus paying players. In my opinion, the best players should always get paid. If your best player is a fullback, then pay your best player the top of the line fullback money. I know you shouldn't want to play fullbacks, but your best player is valuable because you're going to build a good offensive coaching staff, and a good coaching staff in general is going to build their system around their best player's strengths. So it doesn't matter if your best player is an off-ball linebacker, and off-ball linebackers, according to some, don't have value, or a running back, right? Like the Titans, Derrick Henry's contract looks good. Nick Chubb's contract looks good. I mean, Christian McCaffrey's contract when he's healthy it's still a bargain. Todd Gurley's contract was one where his health gave in, but Zeke Elliott's contract, is more or less Zeke Elliott, especially this year with this production getting back. He's more or less kind of lived up to around the production of his contract. So I do think you should pay your best players regardless of positional value, but I also do think there is somewhat of a value chart for it. Like, you can't pay every running back. Not every running back can be paid top of the line. Not every quarterback can be paid top of the line. And when it comes to 3 techniques or 5 techniques or interior defensive linemen in general, and Buckner's a 3 technique, I don't think you should pay a 3 technique unless his name is Aaron Donald. Or because, I mean, I just feel like you can generate interior pressures in a lot of different ways in the NFL. I don't think Buckner was the best fit for the wide 9. I mean, he's a 289-pound defensive lineman. With the larger run gaps, wide 9, you would ideally like a guy like Kinlaw that can just take on double teams and be immovable, bigger, 320-pound defensive linemen that are built lower to the ground. Buckner was a little more Highland pass rusher. Not, again, Buckner, phenomenal all-around player. But to me, from when you factor in all of those things, and then you factor in the fact that you had to pay a 3 technique, $20 million, which is what the Colts paid him. And like you said, it's been an absolute win for the Colts. He's been sensational. He was an all-pro last year. This year, the stats don't bear out how well he's played, but he's been very impactful. They just haven't had the edge presence. They missed Justin Houston from last year, and that's affected his numbers. But overall, I still think the Niners made the correct move. Now, Javon Kinlaw's career, how it turns out, that'll be a conversation that will ultimately dictate whether it was a good move for the Niners. But the logic that goes into making the decision, I mean, you never want to trade a franchise-type player, and that's what DeForest Buckner was from the moment he was drafted 7th overall for the 49ers. But when you take out emotions and take out the intangible aspects of it, and you just look at the tangibles, to me, it was a sound trade. They got a very high-value pick, 13th pick in the draft, and I think it's a win for both teams, and I think it's a win for the player too, because I think Buckner is a better fit for the way the Colts front is set up, rather than to play in the wide 9 for the 49ers.
Definitely. So yeah, I mean, he said he was willing to take less money, so he would have liked to stay. And you can't help but think the defense would be better, obviously, with Buckner than Kinlaw, because he's just that much better of a player now. Is it worth the additional $15 million a year, roughly? Assuming Kinlaw makes $5 million, I don't even know. That might be over guessing how much he makes, but a rookie contract versus $21 million a year, is it worth it to have Kinlaw and then some more players, or just Buckner? I don't know. And especially with the team that seems a little cap strapped right now. I know you could say that probably about like 25 teams, but it is true with the Niners when you have Kittle, when you have Warner, when you have Jimmy G making a lot. Like that's three guys right there that are making, some of them like top three at their respective positions.
Yeah, and I the way I originally viewed the Buckner trade, to be honest with you, as much as I was a big fan of Javon Kinlaw before the draft, he has not been the player, at least so far. I mean,
Mhm.
injuries have played a role, but 1.5 years into Javon Kinlaw's career, he's not the player that I thought he would become. So I'm trending towards being wrong there at this exact moment. But so I
Mhm.
was a big fan of Javon Kinlaw, but I do think the Niners were a little bit disingenuous in the fact of you trade DeForest Buckner and then you immediately go draft his replacement 14th overall and give him DeForest Buckner's number. Then it looks like you're trading Buckner for Kinlaw. And I think that's where the discourse of this is where people are
Yeah.
real upset because obviously Javon Kinlaw is looking like he's never going to be the player DeForest Buckner is, even if he's a very good player. I mean, DeForest Buckner is an all-pro player. He's one of the best players in the NFL at his position. He's a top 3 or 4 3 technique in football. So when you're talking like that, no, it doesn't seem like Kinlaw can get to that. And so I think that's where it's a little bit up in the air. I think that's where, teams like New England, when they trade a star player, that's why they trade down. They try and accumulate assets. So you're not putting pressure on one individual to replace that star player that you traded. So I'm with you there. I think that one-for-one kind of deal is what makes the 49ers look a little bad. When they first traded Buckner, honestly, I thought it was an opportunity to retool this team instead of being so invested in their front four, instead of spending so much money in their defensive line, I thought now you save 20 million and now you get a premium corner. So now you have Nick Bosa in a premium corner rather than Nick Bosa, DeForest Buckner, and two guys who aren't the best corners in football starting. So I thought they would do something like that. I mean, the Niners have stayed with their philosophy. They just went for a cheaper option, which is interesting. It adds more to this discourse. But
Mhm.
honestly, I still think that trading to Forrest Buckner was the correct move.
Yeah, definitely. So, either way, the Kinlaw and Buckner comparisons are fair or not, will always kind of follow them, both of these players, which is kind of unfortunate because I feel like you should more look at, what you got in return and not what it came out to be. Like if you traded Buckner for 2 first overall picks and those 2 first overall picks were busts, you'd still do that trade 100 times out of 100, even though the players didn't turn out what you wanted to be, because that's 2 first overall picks. That's one of the, most biggest assets in the NFL. But yeah, that's not going to ever happen most likely. But that's the Buckner trade. And I think we could go on just, we talked about the Buckner trade. We can move on to who is the best team in the NFC. So we talked a little Niners, but I guess, do you want me to? I guess I would go with my best NFC team, and it's a
Yeah.
team that actually has been built similarly with the Niners. They don't really, I guess they have in recent years invested in the cornerback, but their bread and butter is the defensive line, and that's the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I think right now, I know the way the NFC is sitted or is sort of placed right now. There's 4 or 5 teams that have been really good. Cowboys, Cardinals, Rams, Packers, Buccaneers all have 5 or 6 wins, only 1 loss or 0 losses for the Cardinals. But I still am taking the Buccaneers as the team that's going to come out of the NFC this year. Tom Brady has been as good as ever. They still have. I mean, can we even call Antonio Brown the third receiver anymore? I feel like we have to.
No.
I can't. I feel like
No.
we can't do that. It has to be Evans or Godwin because AB has been amazing. He has been fantastic. He hasn't really lost much at all. I feel like if he was the number one, or sorry, not the number one, but if there was more targets to go around or to him, he would be putting up top 7 stats right now. And he already has been playing great, but I like that part. They've had some injuries in the secondary, which is concerning, but that D line is still just it can take over games. You have JPP and Barrett on the outside, and then Vita Vea, who one of the best nose tackles, if not the best in the entire league. And I still am taking this Buccaneers team above pretty much all of them, and they have experience too. And I think that's something that you don't want to have to say, but I think it is important. This Cardinals team has not been to the playoffs under Kingsbury and Kyler. I kind of worry about that. Last year we saw the Bills; they were up and coming, 13-3, and they laid a dud against the Chiefs, and their offense wasn't even that great against the Ravens. So the inexperience there is concerning to me, and I think it could be similar to what the Cardinals experienced this postseason. Um, if they do make it. So for that reason, experience, having Tom, having a really, really good defense, or the making of one, like they came on strong at the end of the year last year, is why I have them number one.
I agree with you. I think Tampa's the best team in the NFC. I don't think that has changed since about maybe the last 4 or 5 weeks of the last year's regular season. They ran through the playoffs. They dominated just about everybody. Uh, I think for sure, I'm 100% with you. I mean, you talked about their front, right? Their secondary's banged up, but I would say where Tampa differs from the 49ers, they've invested a lot of draft assets into their secondary. Their secondary is filled with young second and third round picks that they've drafted. I mean, when you go down the list, Jamel Dean was a top, I think, 60, 70 pick. Carlton Davis was a top 40 pick. Sean Murphy Bunting was a top 50 pick. Antoine Winfield Jr. was a top 50 pick. Jordan Whitehead was another one of their picks. They just have drafted really talented athletes in the second or third round. And I think that's allowed them to have this young, explosive, at times inexperienced, but talented secondary to go with a dominant front seven, the best front seven in football. And they signed those guys. They drafted Vita Vea, who's the guy that makes it all go. He's a special player. And then around him, Jason Pierre-Paul has had a career resurgence. Ndamukong Suh is still a dominant football player. I mean, I took some flack last year because I think Ndamukong Suh is a Hall of Famer, but I still think Ndamukong Suh is a Hall of Famer for what he's been. I don't think he's lived up to the hype he had coming out of Nebraska. People were thinking this is the next, Reggie White type defensive lineman, or he would be what Aaron Donald's been. He hasn't been that, but I think he's a special defensive lineman, and he's been one throughout his career. I think that you look at the rest of their front seven. Levante David, another guy who I think is a Hall of Famer. He's been unheralded for most of his career. But if you look at the three linebackers that have been the special linebackers of the 2010s, it's been Kuechly, Bobby Wagner, and Levante David. And Levante David's name always gets omitted in that conversation, but he is a fantastic player. Devin White's an explosive, very good player. They're just so talented. I mean, Shaq Barrett's obviously fantastic, but I think what makes this team special is their offense is unstoppable. Tom Brady last year had to go through a little bit of an adjustment process of joining a new team and playing in a different system and all of that. This year, it's guns blazing. He's in full control. And Tom Brady, I mean, I can't put into words what it's like watching a 44-year-old man throw the ball the way Tom Brady is. He still has one of the top 10 best arms in the NFL. He is slinging it everywhere. He looks more mobile. He looks more mobile to me in terms of he's always been fantastic in terms of his movement in the pocket, but he looks more mobile in terms of his ability to move outside of the pocket now, which is stunning. Their receivers are obviously fantastic. Antonio Brown, is still Antonio Brown. I'm 100% with you. I think he's the best receiver on this team. I know Mike Evans is a great player. Most people think he's a top 10 receiver in the NFL. Chris Godwin, most people would say, is in the top 15, 16. I think Antonio Brown is so good. I think he's also a top 10 receiver in the NFL right now, and I think he's the best receiver on this team, and I think his chemistry with Brady is like unreal. They have I think his chemistry, honestly, on that team, it's Gronk and Antonio Brown who have the two best chemistry with Brady. It feels like Brady and Antonio Brown are always on the same page. And then you just go down the list. I mean, Leonard Fournette has been very good this year. Ronald Jones is a good player. He's had some bad moments, whether it be in pass protection and Bruce Arians calling him out a little bit, but he's still a good player. And then Gio Bernard looked like what the James White type guy earlier this year before he got hurt. So I think overall it is Tampa Bay. I think Tampa Bay has been the best team start to finish. I know they lost to the Rams, and the Rams are a big-time football team too, with Matthew Stafford looking phenomenal. Arizona's mighty talented. Kyler Murray might be the MVP of football right now, if not for maybe Tom Brady. But I think overall, top to bottom, especially when Tampa Bay gets healthy, they will be the best team.
Yeah, and we didn't even mention, too, they played the Cowboys really close on opening night, and people are still, skeptical of the Cowboys due to what happened last year with Dak being out. And even when he was there, they weren't as good as they are right now. But they beat Dallas, too, and Dallas they're 5-1. They've won some big games. So that I think that goes to show like Tampa Bay can compete with pretty much anyone, and they're not over reliant on their offense to win them every game or their defense to shut anyone out. It's a combination of both, which I think is really key for them. But that's going to be the Buccaneers and sort of why they're still the best NFC team, and you just can't count them out yet until Brady retires and he's gone. You just can't do it. But that's the NFC. And quickly, we can talk about Vish. Who's your AFC team right now? The best one. We are 6 weeks in. Most teams have played 5 or 6 games. But who do you think right now is at the top of the AFC?
Yeah, so I mean, before we get into the AFC team real quick, Blake and I are aware of the bombshell news that seems to be happening. The moment it goes down, if we're still live, we will talk about it. We'll talk about the implications for Washington of acquiring Tua Tagovailoa and of Miami of acquiring Deshaun Watson. So we are aware of it, and we will talk about it the moment it goes down. I think it'll go down here in the next 15, 20 minutes or so. So if we're still there, we'll go on. Sorry about that. So who I think is the best team in the AFC? I still think it's the Buffalo Bills. I think the Buffalo Bills have had two kind of shocking losses in the NFL. I think the first loss to Pittsburgh, it's one of the most bizarre world things that has happened in the NFL season this year. How did that Pittsburgh football team beat this Buffalo Bills football team? And then I think Tennessee, I thought the Buffalo Bills kind of beat themselves in that game. I think a couple things went wrong. And then also you had the like one time Josh Allen fumbles on a quarterback sneak, from on a 4th and 1. It just happened to be in that game, and the Bills happened to lose in that way. And Tennessee obviously played out of their mind. Derrick Henry he's like, I thought maybe Derrick Henry might slow down this year, to be honest with you. I thought the wear and tear and all that would get to him. It's not happening. He's still and he's still unbelievable. So I still think it's the Buffalo Bills. I mean, you look at them top to bottom, their offense is unbelievable. Josh Allen is special. I think you and I have been one of the people who were pretty early on the Josh Allen train at the start of last year when he started playing well. Like, hey, this looks different. Like, this guy is so talented and he's finally put it together. They're able to run the football a bit better this year, not as well as I would like. And I that's where I think Brian Daboll is a little bit overrated. I feel like he's a very good play caller, but I feel like his inability to get the run game going unless Josh Allen's a part of the run game, and I think a lot of that has to do with how special Josh Allen is as a runner, is a problem for this team at times. I think it puts too much on Josh Allen having to drop back each play and make something happen. But they have obviously fantastic receivers. They have 4 good ones. Stephon Diggs is terrific. Emmanuel Sanders has been very good. Cole Beasley, he's also a good wide receiver, and then Gabe Davis is good. So top to bottom, they're very good like that. But I think the best thing about the Buffalo Bills right now is how good their defense is playing. It's been a massive improvement from last year. And the Buffalo Bills defense last year had 2 main issues. They didn't have a very good defensive line or a big defensive line, so they struggled to stop the run. And their corner outside of Tre'Davious White was a giant question mark. It was Josh Norman. It was Levi Wallace. And in and out, Josh Norman wasn't a great fit for their system. But you look at it now. Josh Norman was a good fit for their system. He's just not the same player he used to be. Sorry, I was thinking about Josh Norman at Washington for a second. But the point is, if you look at it now, they've solved both of those issues. Levi Wallace is quietly playing really, really well as a starting corner on the other side of Tre'Davious White. He's playing really, really well. And then their defensive line, it's deep. They go about 8 deep. I mean, you go down the list. Greg Rousseau, who we talked about last week when we talked about the Bills, he's playing terrific. Mario Addison is really, really good. He makes an impact. Jerry Hughes is an ageless wonder. He's absolutely outstanding. Star Lotu Lele, who we mentioned we felt like Buffalo was missing when he opted out last year in the run game. He's still a stout piece in the interior of their defensive line. You go down the list, it's a deep physical defensive line, and I think it's made them a lot better in the run game. The 2 safeties are obviously fantastic. Poyer and Hyde, I think they're the top 5 safety duo in the NFL. They're both really, really good, and they do every single thing very well. I've always compared them to Ward and Tart with the 49ers. I think they're both kind of the same way, kind of under talked about, but both players are really, really sound. They do every single thing really well, and they can do it all, and they're very good. And then their linebackers, Tremaine Edmonds looks healthier this year. He looks faster this year. I thought his health was a little bit of an issue. He was inconsistent with his play last year, but he's been terrific. And so I think overall, I know there's a lot of great teams in the AFC, but I still would take the Buffalo Bills.
Yeah, I'm again that's who I thought or predicted to win the Super Bowl this year. They were kind of my team going into it, and everything from what we've seen so far is kind of indicating that they're even, I would say, a little better than last year. I know they have 2 losses already this year, and they had 3 last year, but Josh Allen has still looked great. You mentioned running the ball. Josh Allen helps with that a lot. Defense has improved drastically. I know they allowed a lot of points to the Titans, but they did pretty great against the Chiefs offense, who, although they have been struggling, they still have Patrick Mahomes, so you can't discount them on that. But I think the main thing with them that's been surprising, I would say, is their O-line seems to not be as good as it was last year. Seems like maybe this is just me, but Josh Allen's been getting pressured more, and he's someone who, even if he gets pressured more, it's not that big of an issue because you're almost happier with him outside the pocket because he can pretty much throw from any platform. He has a huge arm, so the whole field's still open, and his rushing abilities probably top 5 for a quarterback. Now, he's not close to Lamar or Kyler in his, start-stop acceleration, just being able to pick up yards like that. But, I mean, he's hurdled people. He's hurdled Anthony Barr standing up his rookie year. He hurdled L'Jarius Sneed this year. He's powerful, strong. He'll put his body on the line. So you like that. So I'm not too concerned about him getting pressured more. And then Dawson Knox emerging as a tight end I would almost say this year's like Bobby Tunyon, just kind of came out of nowhere and has been performing well. And then obviously I think the receiving core is great. Emmanuel Sanders has been a godsend for them. He has been incredible. He's developed as their wide receiver 2 now, and they still have Beasley in the slot, and obviously Diggs is an alpha number 1 receiver. So their offense, I don't see them slowing down anytime soon. And one thing that you just need in the postseason is the teams that, you can have a really well-rounded team. And even if you have a better team on paper, just having Josh Allen, who at this point, I think you have to include him in your top 5 quarterback list. Just having that is such a trump card because he can just take stuff out of nowhere. And you don't really feel out of the game if you do have him. So again, I'm with you with Bills being the best AFC team. And overall, I'm a little disappointed in the AFC this year. I thought coming in, the AFC would be definitely better than the NFC. But so far, you look at the top 8 teams, I'd say probably 5 of them are probably NFC. And that is not something I would have expected. The Chiefs and Browns being kind of the 2 teams that have been not as good as people thought they would be, not as good as we thought they would be. So it's a little disappointing to see that, but I think it's safe to say those are the best team.
Not just Chiefs and Browns, though. Miami has been disappointing. New England, I would say New England hasn't disappointed, but they're shown to be a younger team that just struggles to close out close ball games late. They make a lot of mistakes that beats themselves. Denver, to me, has been a little bit disappointing. I expected their defense to play a lot better under Vic Fangio. That's been disappointing. Indianapolis has been disappointing. There's been quite a few teams that we expected to be better and that have struggled to start this season. But one more thing to touch on, because I think we both agree on the Bills. I did want to mention why I don't think Baltimore is the best team in the AFC. Obviously, Baltimore is probably the consensus pick right now. They're coming off 2 straight, super juiced wins that would get people super juiced up, right? I do agree with one thing with Baltimore. Lamar Jackson might be the best, playing the best quarterback in the NFL right now. I think there's an argument to be made that he is the best player currently in the NFL right now in this season. That doesn't mean I think he's an overall better player than a Mahomes or an Aaron Rodgers, but he's playing better than them right now. When you add in his ability to run and what he's doing in the pass game, which is out of this world. I mean, we've been trying to tell you the last year or so, this guy's a much better passer than he's been given credit for, and we're seeing it this year because the guys around him, like Hollywood Brown, have been playing a lot better. I don't think Baltimore is just that good of a football team around him. I think their offensive line has played better, but I think I don't want to overrate their offensive line beating up on a Chargers team where I think their depth at defensive line is an issue. And I think they match up horribly with the Baltimore Ravens because one, they don't have the troops to be able to stop the run, and two, Brandon Staley wants to play too high and he doesn't want to stop the run. He wants to stop the pass first. And when you combine those two things where you don't have personnel and schematically you're not that invested in stopping the run and you go up against the Ravens run game, you're going to get buzzsawed. And that's what happened. I think their defense, Wink Martindale, has done an incredible job adjusting and being able to make do with the fact that they have quite a few guys off. I mean, Owe has been fantastic as a rookie at all of that, but I still think their defense is maybe missing a couple things in their front seven that I think will ultimately get maybe a little more exposed in the playoffs. I don't have any questions about Lamar Jackson. I don't have any questions about Lamar Jackson in the playoffs. I just have a couple questions, especially with the offensive line injuries and all of that and the running back injuries, when those things are going to catch up to Baltimore. And they almost did at the beginning of the season. They almost lost to Detroit. They lost to the Raiders. They lost to some teams who maybe aren't on paper, supposedly good teams, but and they won those games because they have Lamar Jackson and he's special and he's unbelievable. But that's why I think Buffalo is better than Baltimore.
You could throw the Colts game in there too, where Lamar just, I mean, obviously he had like 85% completion, over 400 yards. So yeah, that's insane. And I'm with you. Like I would say Lamar, even if he doesn't win it, you can't tell me he's not the most valuable player in the league, because if you took him off this Ravens team, I think they would be in contention for a top 3 pick. I really do. It's kind of similar to what the Seahawks had with Russell Wilson, where you feel like, oh, like the Niners are better, the Cardinals are better, but the Seahawks have Russell Wilson, so he's kind of the equalizer. That's how I think Lamar is what he is to the Ravens, is what Russell Wilson's been to the Seahawks for the last 7 years.
I think this is a great comparison. I think Lamar's season this year, honestly, in terms of people getting their eyes really open to how good of a passer he is, reminds me a little bit of, you remember in Russell Wilson in 2015? The Seahawks started off maybe a little bit slower, and Russell Wilson led the league in touchdowns, I believe, in 2015. And people were like, oh my God, Russell Wilson's way better from the pocket, and his ability to throw is way better than we've been giving it credit for. We've just been saying beast mode, beast mode, beast mode the entire season, the last 3 years. And I think that's what's happening a little bit this year. Like everybody was enamored with Lamar's running ability. They didn't take it into account that the Ravens offense schematically in the pass game isn't the best, and those receiving options weren't great. And now that Hollywood Brown is playing very, very well, Mark Andrews is unbelievably solid, and Lamar has gotten even better, you're seeing, wow, Lamar Jackson is a really good passer. And when you combine his passing and running, he's one of the 5 or 6 elite quarterbacks in the NFL.
Definitely. So that's the AFC. We said the Bills, they're the best AFC team. Ravens, they have a great record, but their roster is just not as good, although Lamar has been the most valuable player, debatably. I'd put him there. Vish, you'd probably have him in your top 2 or 3 as well. So that's the AFC. But we talked about some of the best teams. We talked about AFC, NFC. Now let's go to sleeper teams, one for the AFC, one for the NFC. And I think we both think this team is a big sleeper right now. Started off rough, had a couple of weird losses against the Bengals with some interesting reffing. I think you could say that every game, but against the Bengals, and then against the Cardinals, they missed a chip shot to win it. But Vish, why are the Vikings the NFL's biggest sleeper team right now?
Yeah, I think the Vikings are the biggest sleeper team. I mean, you touched on it. First of all, they have had a few things go unlucky. They shouldn't be a 500 football team. They're better than a 500 football team. Heck, they nearly blew that game against Carolina when they really shouldn't have, because Greg Joseph missed another kick that should have iced the game. So the Vikings have issues in that sense. I mean, Mike Zimmer can never seem to get reliable play from his kicker. I mean, Blair Walsh was one of the best kickers in the NFL as a rookie and in his second year. And then Mike Zimmer needs Blair Walsh to kick well, and Blair Walsh goes off the rails. I don't know what the deal is. Maybe Mike Zimmer has bad voodoo when it comes to his kickers, but I think we talked about Minnesota a lot this offseason. We felt they were a playoff team. We felt their defense was a lot better than it was given credit for. All of those things, their offense is fantastic. And then at the beginning of the season, they lost to Cincinnati, a team that we didn't expect to be that good. And we thought, oh, maybe we were wrong on Minnesota. Minnesota's a really good team. Kirk Cousins is playing unbelievably well. Kirk Cousins has played unbelievably well every single season. He's been a part of the Minnesota Vikings, and that trend is continuing. He's unbelievable. Justin Jefferson is a true number one wide receiver. He's very good. Dalvin Cook, obviously, when healthy, very good. Alexander Mattison, one of the most underrated number 2 running backs in the NFL. The issue is, again, clutch time fumble, gets you in trouble, almost lose a game. It happens, but it's just bad voodoo with the Vikings. But overall, Mike Zimmer's got their defense playing a lot better. They started off the season a little slow. They're a very good defense now. They're good defense against the run and the pass. We'll see. They've got Patrick Peterson got hurt this weekend, so we'll see how that affects them moving forward because he'd been playing really good football the last couple weeks. But overall, to me, Minnesota is capable of beating anybody in the NFC because they have so much firepower on both offense and defense, and Zimmer is capable of putting together a good defensive game plan, where if Kirk gets hot and their offense is rolling with Cook and the play action to Jefferson and Thielen, they can beat anybody. I think Minnesota looks like a playoff team. I think Minnesota is got a good chance of being in a playoff team because I think the other teams are really competing with for that 6-7 wild card spot are all in the same division, whether it be Carolina and New Orleans are in the same division, and then Niners, Seattle, I guess, are in the same division. And of course, Seattle lost Russell Wilson. So I think Minnesota's got a nice little path that's set up for them to get there because I do expect the Bears to drop off. But yeah, I think Minnesota's not being talked about enough. I don't think Kirk Cousins is being talked about enough. They're very good.
Yeah, and I think my first thing I was going to say was Kirk Cousins. This has been his best season, maybe yet, maybe. I mean, statistically, it's been one of the best, and he's done this kind of seems over the years. But a lot of the Dalvin Cook touchdowns are kind of going to Kirk to a lot to Thielen. Obviously, that's his favorite red zone target, and then Jefferson as well, and then KJ Osborne, who's kind of emerged onto their scene as their third guy, and they lost Rudolph, and then they lost Irv Smith. They have Conklin in there now, and he's been okay, been a little productive, but Osborne's kind of been the guy that slotted into the third receiving option, you can say. And you mentioned Madison. I mean, when Madison started, I don't think they've lost a game, so that's always exciting for them. And maybe that's saying Dalvin Cook is Madison better? Not seriously, but he's been really good. And then the defense started off really rough, and it kind of made us worried because, in the offseason, we were saying this Vikings defense is going to be elite this year. It will be a top 8 defense. And they started off slow, but slowly they've been picking up and getting a lot better. They made the Panthers offense look pretty bad in the most recent game they just played and sacked Darnold and forced a lot of turnovers. So that's got to be good for them and, just, I guess, hopeful, you could say. And then
they made Darnold look like Darnold. Of course, Darnold looked like Darnold without Christian McCaffrey, but that's a story for another day.
Yeah, exactly. I think the only big concern with their defense is the cornerback position. I feel like Breeland struggled a lot and hasn't been the guy that they thought he could be. But that's my biggest concern with them. Honestly, the O-line's always been a concern, but Darisaw, he was injured and now he's in there, and I think he's been doing solid so far. So the Vikings, honestly, I mean, they're a couple games away from being, you could say, or a couple plays away from being 1-5. On the same note, they're a couple plays away from being 5-1. So maybe 500 is fair. I don't know, but it's been an interesting start for them. But I think they'll continue to get better as the season progresses.
I think so too.
So that's the Vikings, big sleeper. The other sleeper that I kind of wanted to get into was the Indianapolis Colts. So obviously with them, Carson Wentz knew he's coming in, starting for them, and he started off pretty good. Their record hasn't been the best. They're 2-4, tough loss against the Ravens on Monday Night Football, which was a fantastic game. But Vish, do you think the Colts are a sleeper and someone that people should put on their radar?
No. I personally don't think so. I know Indianapolis's schedule is very favorable to close the season. I mean, you got Jacksonville twice, you got Houston once. Theoretically, that's 3 free wins unless, maybe Trevor Lawrence makes a magic happen. He's been unbelievable the last few weeks. He looks
Yeah.
like a future star at quarterback. He looks special, but we'll talk about Lawrence another day. I don't think Indianapolis is that good of a football team. I don't think they have a very good offense. I think their offensive line has struggled. Quentin Nelson coming back will obviously give them a huge boost. He's special, but I don't think they're that good. I don't think. I mean, Carson Wentz has been playing a lot better than I expected. He was terrible last
Mhm.
year. He's pretty good this year, so that's always a positive. Frank Reich's obviously a great coach. Jonathan Taylor is an excellent running back. There's no doubt about that. Michael Pittman is a very good wide receiver. I liked him before the draft, but I mean, with Paris Campbell hurt, T.Y. Hilton to me is on his last legs. I think there's some issues for them from all of those standpoints. But to touch on why I don't think, and obviously their defense, which started off the season playing poorly, has played a lot better. They've really picked it up and been very good the last couple of seasons. I don't have any doubts about that. They're definitely they had also a tough schedule to start the season. So all of these things are in place with the Colts, no doubt about it. I just think I don't know. I didn't believe that much in Indianapolis before the season. I thought there would be one team that would make the playoffs from that division, and it would be Tennessee. I still stand that way. I don't. I still think there's a few questions I have from Indianapolis, especially their offense. I think there's a lack of explosive element to their offense. Taylor brings it in some sense, but there's no explosive pass game, and Paris Campbell going on IR doesn't help that. So overall, I just look at the AFC. I look at the teams that I think can make the playoffs. Maybe Indianapolis can sneak in as a quote unquote sleeper, but I just don't know. And I don't know when the games become, a little more where Indianapolis has to win. And maybe they've been doing a good job not putting the games on Carson Wentz till now, and I think
Mhm.
that's led to better play from Carson Wentz. But I do think Wentz is still showing shades of being erratic, which he's been his entire career, even when he was going to win the MVP. And I think that if they maybe put a little more on Wentz, we could see maybe Wentz what he did last year. I don't know. I don't believe in Indianapolis, but hey, we might be sitting here 8 weeks from now and I could be telling you, damn, Blake, you were so right about the Indianapolis Colts, and I was so wrong about them.
Yeah, so I think they are a sleeper. I'm gonna disagree here. I thought they would make the playoffs. I thought they'd win the AFC South. Now they still could. They're a couple games back from the Titans. They barely lost to them earlier this year. But yeah, I mean, you mentioned, or I think the main reason is just Wentz has been really solid for them. Now their O line hasn't been particularly good. We know Costanzo left, and they thought they could replace him, but the replacement hasn't been that great. Quentin Nelson, their all-pro guard, he goes down. That's hurting for them a little bit. And then obviously receiver, um, they just don't have the best receivers. It's kind of been that way. It seems like the last 3 years they rely on their tight ends and running back a little more than other teams, you could say. Um, but I think this offense has potential to be good enough to where their defense can lead them to more victories. And they started off poorly. You mentioned they've gotten better, similarly to the Vikings in that sort of way. Start off slow, get better, and they do have uber talent on the defense. I mean, we mentioned Leonard. You talk about DeForest Buckner. We mentioned him earlier. You have an All-Pro D tackle. That's a good combo right there. And I still think Eberflus is a good DC who could be potentially lined up for a head coaching job in the near future. And then I think Jonathan Taylor will pick it up. I really do believe that he is firmly grounding himself as a top 10 running back if he isn't already. I don't think he's in the top 5 topics, or top 5 range, but I think you can firmly put him in the top 10 and someone you can run an offense through to get you to the wild card. Now, can they make a deep run? I'm not saying that. I don't believe that, but I do think this is a team that going in later into the season, we'll be wondering how they started off so slow, and why we didn't talk about them more. But yeah, I mean, a couple different bounces in that Ravens game, and they're 3-3. The Ravens are what, not 5-1 anymore. So I'm going Colts as a sleeper, although I do have questions about if they can go deep into the playoffs or even win their division, as the Titans have a couple games on them and a tiebreaker as of right now.
Yeah, and part of the I do want to I do think a lot of those things are true. Like, Jonathan Taylor is very talented, and I agree with you. They do have talent on their defense, especially Leonard and Buckner, who are both very good. Though I do think Leonard's a tad overrated in terms of his ability in coverage. I think he can be had at times. I don't think he's at the
Mhm.
level of a Kendricks or a Fred Warner there, but that's my personal opinion. The reason I do think their rushing offense with Taylor though is getting a tad overrated. Taylor's two best games against the season have come against two not so good run defenses. I mean,
That's true.
Miami and Houston are both in the bottom half of the league when it comes to yards per carry given up. And I do think that it's not that I don't think Indianapolis is good, or I don't think they're that good, but it's not that I don't think Taylor is that good. I do think Taylor is in the top 10 running back conversation. I think that Indianapolis overall, I don't believe maybe Quentin Nelson will make that much of an impact on their offensive line. And I'll be sitting here like an idiot, but I don't think their offensive line is that good. I think their offense lacks an explosive element. I think Carson Wentz is very, very average. And that's how he's played right now, in my opinion. And I think while their defense is good, it's getting healthier. Their secondary is playing better. I still think their defense can be had because as good as Eberflus is, I think Eberflus is also a little bit vanilla at times, and you can tendency Eberflus into what coverage he's going to play, and you can have some
Mhm.
quarters beaters, you can have some cover three beaters, cover two beaters ready to go against that defense. I mean, Seattle did it to them week one. Shane Waldron had a quarters beater, and they had Tyler Lockett for a deep touchdown pretty open. So overall, yeah, I mean, we'll see. I think you're right. Indianapolis could be a sleeper team, but in my opinion, they aren't. We'll find out.
Yeah, we'll have
Before
to
we move
revisit
on,
soon.
uh, to talk. Yeah, we'll revisit this for sure. Before we move on to talk about our last topic, which will be the Deshaun Watson rumor. People said the trade could happen this week. Miami was picking up. Obviously, Miami's desperate. We do have a little donation from the Remilius Sports Report. Appreciate it. He says, to me, props for Stafford being validated, or props for Stafford are being validated in LA. Stafford among the QB league leaders. Rams 5-1, haven't even played a great full game yet. I'm with you. Stafford looks unbelievable. He looks exactly what I thought he would look like on the 49ers, the team I did want to trade for him. But yes, he's looked unbelievable. And yes, I don't think the Rams have put together a great full game yet on both offense and defense. I think there's been some inconsistencies, as you would expect, with some moving parts on both offense and defense. And yeah, I do think the Rams are definitely one of those 5-6 teams that are true Super Bowl contenders, and they're excellent.
Yeah, definitely. I'm interested to see how the NFC West, the final records of the year, because I could see the Rams being one. Obviously, you could see the Cardinals being one because they're 6-0 right now. But I mean, what's going to happen with the bottom two? Could the 49ers pass either of them? I don't know, but it'll be an interesting end of the season for the Rams in NFC West. But real quickly, I just wanted to touch on this because this is kind of breaking, and this I won't talk about it long as the other news. The Watson news is a little more interesting and impactful in the NFL realm. But Vish, did you have any quick thoughts on the Packers signing Whitney Merciless? It came out reported today the Packers have had injuries at outside linebacker, but did you have any quick thoughts?
Yeah, I've not watched a lot of Whitney Merciless over the last 2 years. I know Whitney Merciless was a very good player, but there's not been a lot of reasons to watch the Houston Texans defense over the last 2 years. So, I mean, just from a couple games I've seen here and there on TV, I know he's still impactful. I mean, you go through his numbers, it looks like he's still playing good football. I mean, he's a very good veteran player who's been a very good player for a long time in the league. I think he's going to add to the Packers as a situational pass rusher. I mean, we've talked about the Packers defense in the past. We've had a little bit of question marks about their front seven. Their secondary obviously is good, especially once Jair Alexander comes back from injury. It'll be very good. Amos is playing good football. Eric Stokes has been excellent. He's really physical, aggressive, and he's a great athlete. And he plays with a ton of confidence, and those traits are showing off when he plays on the field. But I think the situational pass rusher will be helpful. Z Smith is going to come back soon. So Z Smith, Merciless, some combination of Rashawn Gary, and then of course Kenny Clark, who's having an outstanding season so far this season. So I think overall it is a good signing. It's a helpful signing for the Packers. I think it'll be more impactful than the Jalen Smith signing.
Oh, it will be more impactful than the Jalen Smith signing. That's for sure. But I had three main takeaways. So for the Packers, first one being it was reported that Whitney Merciless actually turned down offers for bigger money to come to the Packers. Now, this is something that I feel like when this happens, it's a telltale sign that he wanted to go to this team specifically for contention. And he thought that the Packers were in better contention than some of the other teams that offered him a contract, which is just awesome because obviously you want to feel validated in the fact that, someone's coming to a team because he wants to win and he thinks he has a better chance there. So he's willing to sacrifice more money. That's number one. Number two, the Packers outside linebacker situation coming into the year looked great, right? You had Preston Smith, Zadarius Smith, the Smith brothers, and then you had Rashawn Gary. All three of them. Preston was having a down year last year, so you were kind of anticipating Gary starting and then Preston being the third guy that comes in when one of them needs a breather or to pass rush. Well, it just so happens that Preston Smith has been really, really solid this year in both against the run and the pass, which was a bit of a pleasant surprise coming into the year. Bad thing for the Packers was Zadarius Smith being injured for short term, and then it seems it's going to be more long term now, and hopefully he'll come back by the end of the regular season. But knowing that Preston Smith also got recently injured and he's not 100%, which is concerning. So that really only leaves you with Rashawn Gary, Jonathan Garvin, and Ladarius Hamilton. Now, Hamilton and Garvin, I don't know if you've even heard of them, Vish, because they haven't really played all that much up until these injuries started coming in. And so having guys who really aren't getting snaps be your starters is rather concerning. And getting someone like Merciless, who he's played roughly 50% of the snaps for the Texans this year, just getting him to be a rotational guy is pretty huge. And I think pass rush is kind of his forte, you could say. So having better pass rush is always a good thing, especially for a team like the Packers that's not really been their best attribute on defense. So there's that. And then the third and final point is that the Packers have had really good success with these mid-season signings or, signing veterans sort of before the season or right after the season. Instantly, you can think of Devondre Campbell before the season. He's been amazing. PFF has him as one of the highest linebackers starting for the Packers. Never thought I'd say that. But then you have some people like Tyler Irvin, who was signed as a kick returner and gadget guy on offense. Snacks Harrison, who played on the interior D-line for a little bit a few years ago. Ahmad Brooks, who they signed from the Niners to play edge a couple years ago midseason. So they've done this, and they've had relatively good success signing these guys. And I think Merciless is going to be the next one in this line of guys they've been really good in the past. They come here, they have some juice left, and they can contribute. And that's really what the Packers need right now.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think you laid it out with all the injuries. I have heard of Hamilton. I've not heard of the other guy. Yeah, I mean, we'll see. I think Green Bay has proven that they're firmly entrenched as one of the 3 or 4 best teams in the NFC, which is what we expected before the season. I think a lot of people were thrown for a loop after that Week 1 game against New Orleans, but it's mostly settled. Aaron Rodgers is back to playing unbelievable. He's playing at an MVP level. Devontae Adams is putting on a show, and Aaron Jones has been excellent. And so I think overall, yeah, I think he definitely helps. And I think even when those guys do come back, having a wily veteran like Whitney Merciless, who knows how to get pressure on the quarterback consistently, will be useful and will be helpful because you can never have enough edge rushers. And of course, with Kenny Clark just dominating inside, I think it'll help out Whitney Merciless quite a bit.
Yeah, but, definitely. Go ahead.
We got to move to our. No, I was just going to move us on to the final topic of the day, and that's the big rumor going around, the trade that has been reported by I want to get his name right. I think it's Cole. Cody M. Davis. He's a Texans beat reporter, and he reported that he is hearing in regards to the hashtag Texans closing in on a deal that would send Deshaun Watson to the Miami Dolphins. I'm hearing that it would be a 3-team deal that would send Tua Tagovailoa to the Washington football
Mm,
team. And this was also confirmed by Benjamin Albright, who said that the Broncos are rumored to be, who's obviously one of the best insiders, but he said Broncos are rumored to be interested in Tua, but he thinks Tua ends up in Washington. So, Blake, I'll start with you. What do you think the implications of this deal are going to be for Miami? What do you think the implications of this deal is going to be for Washington with Tua going there? Do you know why Tua wants to, or Washington wants to trade for Tua? How do you
mm.
think? Do you think Watson will start immediately for Miami? What kind of impact do you think that will have? Why do you think Miami's trading for him right now, knowing that his legal issues still haven't played, or not legal issues, but his situation has not played itself out? Give me your thoughts on all of it.
Yeah, so we can just start with the Texans. This is pretty obvious. He doesn't want to be there. They don't want him. They are rebuilding. They pretty much just want to get as many picks as they can. I think we can both agree on that. We don't really need to talk too much Texans. So they're just going to take whatever their best offers for him. That's the Texans. Dolphins is a little more interesting, right? Because they've had early picks, they've had a lot of picks. We even, made a quarterback in the draft, and or should they trade for Watson? And I think it's pretty clear why they want to trade for Watson now. Tua has looked better than last year, but it's still not to the point where you're hoping or you thought he's as good of the number 6 pick as he could have, or number 5 pick as he could have been. Now, I think it's just really unfortunate for him that he's in the same class as Herbert, who had the best rookie quarterback season ever, and Burrow, who also had a really good rookie season and has been fantastic. And he's going to get compared to them regardless, whether it's fair or not. That's just the reality of the situation. So that also is concerning. And then you factor in that he's been having more injury issues. That was kind of an issue his rookie year too in the offseason. He had the hip injury, so he was out, missed a lot of stuff. And then this year he's been injured in and out of games. So you're concerned with that. And the Dolphins right now are kind of one of the big enigmas. We, going into the season, thought they'd be really good. They were 10-6 last year. They had a really good defense. They picked up a ton of new weapons, but the issues just have not really gone away with them. Their O-line has been pretty horrible. Their weapons are all injured or maybe not performing to what we thought. Like the running back room has been pretty dreadful. Gaskin and Waddle have been solid, but Parker's been injured. Will Fuller's been injured, and their defense hasn't been as good as last year. So you compound all those issues, and right now they're looking at a top 5 pick, and that pick's going to the Eagles. So they have no reason to kind of throw in the flag right now. So they need to really just go all in. And Flores, I mean, if he has another bad year this year and next year, is he even going to be there? I don't know. I mean, their defense hasn't been that great, so you wonder about that. So for the Dolphins, it's really you get Watson and you have this guy who's been labeled a top 5 quarterback. Now we haven't seen him play in a while, but you can still expect him to be a really, really good quarterback for your team, and something that's been missing because you have the pieces in place with a quarterback like him to make the playoffs and push deep. Considering they have a ton of new weapons and their defense still has talent, although they've struggled so far this year. So I think the Dolphins side makes sense. And then quickly on Tua to Washington. Washington, I mean, they've been struggling with this quarterback situation. It seems like the last decade. They had RG3, he didn't pan out. They had Kirk Cousins, he was good, but they didn't want to pay him. Then they had Alex Smith and a bunch of other veteran quarterbacks like Kyle Allen. Now they have Fitzmagic and he's injured. So I think it's just a revolving door, and they want to try their luck with a prospect who, yeah, he struggled thus far in his career, but he has also shown positive signs, and he hasn't really been healthy. And maybe if he becomes healthy, to being the number 5 pick and as maybe as good or on par with Herbert and Burrow and be where we thought he could be or where he was drafted to be. So I think from that angle, that makes sense. And they're also not – they've been struggling this year too, Washington has. So I think those are kind of the angles from each team. I think the Dolphins are just – this is a pretty bold move right now because it looks like a desperation move, if I'm being honest. They've been struggling. They don't have a round pick. The thing with Watson hasn't settled. We still don't know what's going to result in that. So it kind of seems like desperation from the Dolphins and the Texans. Obviously, they're just saying, take him off our hands. He doesn't want to be here. We don't want him and all that. So
That's exactly where I wanted to start. This smells heavily of Dolphins being desperate because their season has not panned out the way they wanted to. They just lost to what many people consider to be the worst football team in the NFL in Jacksonville at a neutral site. Their quarterback, their issues go far beyond their quarterback. I mean, the Laramie Tunsil trade, all of that, the assets have not been used correctly. I mean, I'm not the biggest Tua fan, so I can harp on Tua over Justin Herbert, but Austin Jackson was a bad pick. That's what it's looking out to be right now. Noah Igbenenini was not the best pick, and it's looking like that their defense has not been close to what it was last year. I do think there is a question of Brian Flores. Could he be on the hot seat? I mean, the things change in this league so quickly, and he very well could be. Chris Greer, same thing, because they had so many opportunities to build a very good football team, and they're not a very good football team through this year. So I think their problems go way beyond Tua. They don't pass protect well. I think they have schematic issues in their offensive, in their entire setup of their offense. I don't think they run the football that well. I don't think the weapons surrounding Tua are that good. Though Will Fuller was fantastic last year and is a very good player when healthy. Jalen Waddle, we believe in him a lot. We think he has massive potential. And Devontae Parker has shown to be a good player at times in this league. It's not been working this year. In terms of Watson obviously presents an immediate upgrade. He's way better than Tua. They're not in the same conversation talent-wise. He's a way higher ceiling than Tua, but he also already is way better than Tua. Tua has issues with his injuries. Obviously, that's not been helpful. He hasn't had the opportunity to be fully healthy and go through his development, but he's also limited physically. He's smaller. He's not the most athletic quarterback. He's been better in muddy pockets and with people around him, but that was something he didn't do that well in college, or he didn't do well last year. He's obviously a pretty accurate quarterback, but he doesn't have the strongest arm. He doesn't have a big arm. So there's issues with him physically that Deshaun Watson solves those issues. I mean, they had to make that big move. Watson and them have been connected for a long time, and it does make sense from that standpoint. Tua to Washington, I guess, kind of makes sense to me. He's still talented. Maybe Washington can get something out of him. They also have Fitzpatrick, and so worst case scenario, Tua can play the first 3 quarters, and Fitzmagic can come off and finish the 4th quarter, and they can maybe win a few games like that, the way Miami did. I'm obviously joking, but I don't know if that's the best landing spot for Tua personally, if that's the best spot for him to go. But all of it, we'll see if it plays out this way. We'll see if Tua does end up in Washington. I think Washington's issues also go far beyond the quarterback. It's not a Heineke-Fitzpatrick issue, though I do think that they're paying the price for not properly addressing the quarterback this offseason and feeling comfortable going with Ryan Fitzpatrick and Taylor Heineke as their first top 2 quarterbacks. I think that was a horrible decision. We touched on it. It should have been Andy Dalton. Maybe it should have been trade for Jimmy G. Maybe make a move for somebody, but it shouldn't have been what they went through. And I think they're going through that right now because their defense isn't as good as we expected, just like Miami's. But I think overall it starts with the fact that Miami's majorly desperate. They should not be as bad as they are. They're bad. They should have 0 wins technically because Ramondre Stevenson should have never fumbled the ball in that New England game, and New England should have kicked the game-winning field goal, and that should have been the end of that game. So there's a lot of issues with Miami. Tua's not the biggest issue, even though I don't think Tua's going to solve their issues. I think Deshaun Watson, because he's so special, might be able to. And so for all those reasons, I think it's a solid move across the board for all the teams involved. But guys, go ahead.
Just real quickly, I didn't even mention, but they have squandered these first rounders that they've been accumulating. I think we praised them for the moves that they made to get them and that it was great value. But on that same note, we can't sit here and say like they've made the best use out of them, because it looks like everyone that they've drafted from the most like last 2 or 3 drafts, like in the first round, none of them have really been as good as we thought they could be, especially when you have with the Tua Jackson and the cornerback. I'm not sure how to pronounce his name, but you take all 3 of those guys and all 3 of them are underperforming where you drafted them. That's tough, because that should be like you got to hit at least one of them or don't trade your good players away. It's one of the 2.
Agreed. And
that's tough.
Excuse me, sorry about that. And one more thing in terms of Miami, they don't have their own first round pick. Obviously, Philly
Yeah.
has that trade we talked about last week. It doesn't look right, but they do have the Niners picks, and they do
Mhm.
have the Niners this year's first round pick, which at this moment is looking like a top 15 pick. So theoretically, they still do have all the assets to go get
Yeah.
Watson, and Houston still should get picks, and they have other picks. Obviously, they've accumulated first rounders for a long time now. And so, from all those reasons, we'll see how it goes. But I'm 100% with you. I think the biggest indictment of the fact that they're trading for Deshaun Watson now is that they've squandered the opportunities to draft all these good players for this long. And I think that's really what we're seeing play out right now, because it's not just who you missed out on, right? Tua Herbert, everybody talks about that. But Austin Jackson, he just wasn't the right pick there, and he's not turned out to be the player they thought they would be. And then they drafted Igbenenany, but they have a couple guys like Nick Needham who's played well as their nickel. Obviously, they gave big contracts to both Xavier Howard and Byron Jones prior to that draft. Was corner what they should have gone there with their offensive line
Mhm.
continuously being a question mark? We can debate that all day, but the fact that they've struggled to draft well and they have not been able to fully utilize both all the money they've had in terms of cap space and their draft picks is why they're sitting here at 1-5, I think, and saying, "Oh shoot, we're just gonna have to go trade for Deshaun Watson, save us Deshaun Watson," and we'll see. Obviously, Deshaun Watson, maybe he'll be suspended. Who knows how that stuff is gonna play out? We'll find all of that out. Maybe I think this trade has a chance of going down. We'll see. But yeah,
Mhm.
overall, thank you guys for joining us. We had a kind of shorter show, just around an hour. We got to get back to our school lives, but hopefully after midterms things will slow down a bit. There's a lot of great football coming up. I think the next few weeks we'll be able to find out all these things that we've talked about in the off season and through the first
Mhm.
couple weeks. Who's for real, who's not for real in the NFL. Injuries will start to take a toll, and we'll have a good picture of who are the best teams are, and we'll be here to talk about it. The NBA season has also started, so there's a lot to talk about there. We got to start talking basketball again soon, but we appreciate all of you joining us. Please like, subscribe, please like, subscribe, and share, and we'll be back. And I think we'll be back on Monday, most likely, and we'll hopefully have our Monday, Friday schedule intact and ready to go next week, and hopefully we can continue with it for a few weeks and maintain that schedule. But once again, thank you for joining us. We'll see you next time.